Hello and welcome to today's podcast on Daily Dose. This is a program on Victor Inspires that brings to you sustainable and workable principles for your transformation in order for you to live your best life and be the best you. My name is Victor John Edet and I'm super excited to connect with you today. For the past few days, we have been discussing about insecurity, the major or rather the common causes of insecurity. And we discovered that some of us find ourselves feeling filled with self-doubt and short on confidence. Despite our achievements, yet we feel like a fraud destined to be exposed. And these and many more had made us feel insecure sometimes, but some of us feel insecure most of the time. This can be as a result of the kind of childhood we had, past traumas, recent experiences of failure or rejection, loneliness, social anxiety, negative beliefs about ourselves, perfectionism, or having a critical parent or partner. All these can contribute to insecurity. And we began this series by discussing about the causes of insecurity, which we started with insecurity based on recent failure or rejection. And secondly, we discussed about lack of confidence because of social anxiety, which happened to be our previous podcast. And also on our previous podcast, we discussed about the tools on how we can combat insecurity in social situation. And we say number one is talk back to your inner critics. Number two, prepare in advance. Number three, avoiding social situation just make things worse. Number four, set yourself a limited, realistic goal. And finally, deliberately focus on others to combat intense self-focus. These and many more we discussed in our previous podcast, and also the first podcast we started with on insecurity. And if you haven't listened to any of the podcasts we started on insecurity, I will encourage you to do so in order for you to get maximum value out of it, and in order for you to be enlightened and also find the right tools you need in combating insecurity. On today's podcast, as we wrap up insecurity with the final cause of insecurity, we will be discussing insecurity driven by perfectionism. Some of us have very high standards for everything we do. You may want the highest grades, the best job, the perfect figure, the most beautifully decorated apartment or house, neat and polite kids, or the ideal partner. Unfortunately, life doesn't always turn out exactly the way we want. Even if we work extra hard, there is a piece of the outcome that is at least to some degree out of our control. In our office, we find that bosses may be critical, jobs may be scarce, partners may resist commitment, or you may have genes that make it difficult to be skinny. If you are constantly disappointed and blaming yourself for being anything less than perfect, you will start to feel insecure and unworthy. So while trying your best and working hard can give you an advantage, other aspects of perfectionism are unhealthy. So beating up on yourself and constantly worrying about not being good enough can lead to depression and anxiety, eating disorder, or chronic fatigue. How then can we combat perfectionism? Number one, try to evaluate yourself based on how much effort you put in. which is controllable, rather than on the outcome, which is dependent on external factor. Number 2, think about how much difference it would actually make if your work were 100 or rather 10% better. Let's start with that, 10% better. Would the time and energy spent in checking and rechecking or answering every email really be worth it? Number 3, perfectionism is often based on all or nothing thinking. So try to find the gray areas. Is there a more compassionate or understanding way to view a situation? Are you taking your circumstances into account when you evaluate yourself? Is there something you learned or achieved even if the end result wasn't perfect? Number 4, perfectionists often have conditional self-esteem. They like themselves when they are on top and dislike themselves when things don't go their way. Can you learn to like yourself even when you are not doing well? Focus on inner qualities like your character, sincerity, or good values rather than just on what grades you get, how much you get paid, or how many people like you. Applying these principles and these tools will help you combat perfectionism, as a lot of people today find themselves at this level, and which has caused insecurity in their life and has made them lose out of opportunities for life that would have cost them greatness and for them to be the best version of themselves. I believe you got value from today's podcast, and I would encourage you to still listen to today's podcast again in order for you to get maximum value out of it. Thank you very much for listening to today's podcast. Until I come your way tomorrow, be the best you.